Good morning. Today is July 20th, and I think this is number 30. I'm going to say 37 or 38. That's my best guess. I checked yesterday, but I don't remember right now. So today is a Sunday morning, so that's kind of like maybe this is the weekend vibe. Chilling out on the front porch because it's nice and it's not a heat wave right now, which is also really nice. Um, Today, I'm thinking about the idea of leadership, and this might get a little bit ranty. And I think also just trying to conceptualize like this, where all of this work is leading. I think that I want to talk about leadership as well as where the context of the Haizhen Transformation fits in. Like, what about the Haizhen Transformation will help you become a better leader, or help you become a leader, or help you see yourself as a leader? And I think that that last part is probably the most important part because ultimately what we see and what we perceive in our reality becomes our reality, right? Whatever you think you can or you can't do is what you will limit yourself with or move yourself forward with. You're the one who makes that decision ultimately. Okay, so where to start? So leadership oftentimes is like looked at very hierarchically, where like the leader is the person who's at the forefront. They're the one who's making calling all the shots. They're the person that all the employees, the staff, all the followers look to for some type of direction. This is something that's been built into our system for a long time. Like it's just the predominant assumption that this is how things work. What is needed is a leader, somebody to represent you in your workplace or whatnot, and they're the ones who go out and make the decisions. They're the ones who are the face of the company. They're the ones who take the risk, and all of this, and then everybody else just kind of does what they say. I suppose. Like is that what a good leader is? Like I'm asking you as an individual to kind of reflect on where you've seen in your experience a good leader. And now that you're thinking about good leaders in the back of your mind, think about how they led and actually if that's actually the way that you want to be led and why. Some people might look at a good leader as somebody who gives good directions and then tells you what to do so that you know exactly kind of like what you're doing, and that in some ways makes your life easier where like you don't have to think about what you have to do. Then is that good leadership? Is it? I think we can get to outcomes from there because like in that system you're looking at in the current system, this current paradigm, you're looking at KPIs and like statistics and data and stuff like that, and putting together big projects. Like there are things that can happen because of that way of doing things. So it's not like this, like I'm not here to say that it's wrong that this is the way that things have been done and continue to be done. Um, it's more of a choice of what type of leadership that you'd want and what type of leadership you'd want to see in your own organization. So whether you're working for a huge organization with like lots of people, like hundreds or thousands of people or more, or you're working as a healthcare professional in a community pharmacy, let's say, and you have like a couple pharmacy assistants that report to you, other pharmacist colleagues that you're working with. How would you like to be led in that situation? So that's one thing. I think that there's always the assumption that there's somebody ahead of us that's kind of taking us into a certain direction so that we can then follow them. One of the things that I often think about is whether or not, or one thing that I question is like the direction of leadership, of whether or not that is where I want to go as somebody who's working in an organization. So I work, of course, in like organizations and institutions and as part of teams and things like that. And there can be hierarchies. Like all the places that I've worked have some type of hierarchy, whether it's something that's very firm and concrete, where there's an org chart and, you can see who has the titles, and like the people with titles walk around like carrying them like they're walking around carrying titles like there's some kind of threat. And then I've worked in other organizations where it's much more equitable, where each role has a function, and that function is determined by your experience, your background, and all of that. And at the same time, using your position as a leader or as somebody with experience to better understand the actual needs of the people that are around you. I think that there's elements of that in like academic settings and research settings, because you're looking to study or research the like the ability, like you're doing it for some kind of outcome, right? So if you're studying like a new type of treatment, you're putting the treatment out into the world to benefit people, patients who are afflicted by some type of condition, let's say. So then there's an outcome, and that group is an important group of people to consult with. There's a shift in that in terms of like even corporations moving from shareholder primacy, which is like the people that have a stake in your company, like a monetary stake. They've bought stocks, for example, or they've invested in your company. And they used to be the people that call the shots, right? And that kind of brings us a lot to where we are right now, where a lot of things are just driven by money. Like if you can make money, then you are good. You can continue to exist because you've demonstrated your value through the ability to get more value, right? Money, 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 money. There's a shift now in corporate governance and in corporations to look more at stakeholders, which is like everybody that's kind of involved or affected in the business. And that is, I'm going to say like a slow transition, because even though there's a lot of talk about stakeholders, I think there's just a lot of talk about different stakeholders, saying like, oh yeah, we got to think about this group and that group and all of this. And then in practice, I question and it's not to say that people aren't doing this. I can't comment on that because I don't see what every single company out there is doing. But um, there's like a difference between talking the talk and then walking the walk. And I wonder actually whether a lot of people who talk about like the importance of stakeholders and like how they influence this and that, how many of them are actually taking that stakeholder perspective into account. Because of course, like stakeholders aren't just like, they're not just shareholders, they're not just like the people who work for the company, like management and things like that. But it's also like, of course, your customers or your patients, and then even your employees. Everybody that works at the company is a stakeholder. And I think that signals a shift in a paradigm of leadership to move away from this really top down, like I'm the leader, I'm the one who knows all the things, and I'm going to tell you how it's done. Because like does it really work? I think we see this, for example, with like the whole pandemic situation where work from home became a really big thing. And then now, a number of years after the pandemic's cleared up, life is kind of returning to quote unquote normal, or like resettling into a new normal. And there's a lot of fight against that new normal. A lot of the organizations and companies are saying like, you have to come back to the office. Like work from home was great. You might be more productive. That's what some of the research says. You might be more comfortable. You might have a better quality of life because you're not commuting for hours in the day to get into the office to do something that you could just do at home, which is like sit in front of a computer most of the time and attend meetings and blah, 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 all of this stuff. And there's a shift back towards that where leaders are saying, you need to come back into the office for whatever reason. And then like, is it even clear? Like, is there transparency there in terms of like why people are asking you to move back into the office? Like like for me, for healthcare, we've never left the office. Like from the community pharmacy perspective, the pharmacists have never left the office. They've been in those buildings, in the structures, in the places that people need them all throughout the pandemic. If anything, I'd be curious of seeing how pharmacists can start to move out of those those environments and start to provide care in a more kind of with more freedom, I suppose. I imagine that would be much better for patients to connect with pharmacists as well as for pharmacists in terms of their quality of life. But we're going to park that aside because this video isn't just about pharmacists. This, at a high level, is questioning the current paradigm of leadership, where leadership is looked at as like the person that's at the front end, kind of like steering the ship or kind of giving direction to a business or a company. So what's the other alternative? The more that I work and the more that I am, the more that I have the opportunity to be in a position of leadership, to have influence over others that I work with, I think I see the importance, rather than having having people do what I say. I think it's even more important to understand what needs to be done, something that's agnostic of myself. It's not like this is my my agenda per se. I think that ultimately there are things that end up becoming like my agenda, right? Like these are things that in the back of my mind I'd like to move forward and have come into existence. But I'm going to say that the difference there is that is informed by what is needed in the environment that I'm working in. And I think it ultimately comes down to like, what's the purpose of your company? So a lot of companies there are to make money. So then large decisions like just firing like thousands of people because like, I don't know, like AI is taking over and like you don't need coders anymore, is a business decision, is a decision about money. And it's not surprising that that decision is made, because like the flip side of it is like, why did you hire all of these people? Well, I guess the assumption was if you're developing like software, you're trying to stay ahead, then you want to have all the best engineers, the best software engineers or whatever. And then you're going to just spend the money, right? You're investing to keep your company ahead of the curve. So then it's almost like this was something that wasn't like people couldn't see for. I remember a student of mine sharing a story that one of their friends a couple of years ago, who was in like a computer programmer or a software engineer, 2 years ago thought that their job was untouchable, that they would never be fired. And then now with AI and everything, like their job is obsolete now. So it's kind of like, at that time, in that place, was it that the vision was not there to see kind of like where things were going? And did companies overhire and all of this? Like, I think the root is more than just the symptom. Like, if we end up looking just at the symptom, sometimes we come up with the wrong solutions. Because ultimately, it's kind of like the hiring of all those people were probably to drive profits, right? Invest so that you have people, so that you can stay ahead and do all of the things that you need to do to continue to make money. And again, this is just all about making money, right? Like, what is the ultimate outcome? There may be companies that state certain outcomes, but then if your outcome is only affecting like a limited scope of people, so you're like, I don't know, I'm not gonna touch on any specific outcomes or anything like that, because that's not for me to comment on. But what I do think is important is thinking about you in your own life, in what you're doing for work, and like just questioning if you understand like the reason that you're doing the things that you're doing. You may have a very narrow scope, and I think that if you are able, like if you are provided a vision that you're on board with when you're at your work, then that helps you as an individual then step into a little bit more of a self-leadership role, like a kind of empowered role to start making some decisions. Especially these days with like the size of companies and then like the number of things that are happening, you can't account for every single situation, especially in an industry like healthcare, where you are talking to people and people are unique and people all come with their own set of lived experiences, and that's going to affect how you show up for them in that healthcare space. Healthcare, you might say, is like a very specific example. Um, Ultimately, though, any business has some type of outcome for their customers. It's not like your outcome as a business. Um, Outwardly, you'll never say that I'm just here to take your money, because that's just like if that's all I cared about as a business. If I'm just here to take your money, then like how would you like that? You know. The important thing is like what that outcome is, and if you can take the outcome and really embody it and have that kind of like live through not just your company or your organization as a culture, but then have people that align with that outcome as well, then they begin to feed into the culture of the company, of the organization that you're working with, and it's almost like a co-creation. And I think that idea is very interesting. To me, leadership is more about direction, understanding, and being able to diagnose or see the direction that that an organization, that a project, that a thing is moving towards, so that you can then help to share this direction with other people. And that is more rather than a function of like something special within you as an individual. Um, like your uniqueness is not about your ability to come up with a direction. Your uniqueness, like that particular part, the ability to see more is a perspective taking function, is a function of perspective. You've had more experience, you see more, so then you can kind of like see more of what's about to happen. It's almost like being able to predict, right? Like if you're doing analytics, you want to make sure that you have the right size data set so then you can get some good predictions out of it. So the same thing, if I've been working for 10 years and you've been working for 1 year, I have more experience, I can see more, so I can theoretically have a better guess of where things are going. The vision part, though, is not just about trusting myself only. At the same time, it's about connecting with the people that are around you, even for a person that's worked 1 year or somebody who's just started day one on the job. Those people will bring a very valuable perspective, which is an alternate perspective. So this is where somebody could come in to a company, to a business, and see gaps, right? For the people that are in it and just head down all the time and just like, I'm working in this. I know this to be true. I'm just going to keep on continuing. What could happen is like the outside world changes as well. Like it's not something that's static. So then the world can pass you by. You can still stay in your tunnel and you can disregard anything else that's coming to you just because of whether it's hubris, whether it's ego, because like I got the best idea. Nothing is ever going to like get rid of it. But an outside perspective, somebody from the outside might say like, hey, like I've heard of this thing, like maybe it's AI, right? So someone's like, in school we learned about AI and this is something that's coming up. And it's very easy when it's not real to like when it's not something that's in your field of view to just discount it and be like, oh, like that thing, they'll never get that anywhere. Like, how's it going to affect this industry, right? Right, like even like you look at healthcare, for example, now and therapists, there are a lot of artificial intelligent agents that are providing like kind of like therapy type services. So they're not therapists, but what AI is really good at is taking in your information and then reflecting it back to you, and also being very supportive at the same time, you know? And I think if we as individuals, like, where does that come from? Like, why does AI speak like that? It's probably because that's the way that people like to be talked to. It's nice to be validated. It's nice to be acknowledged. It's nice to be empowered into doing what you want. And as a leader, I think that is one of the most important skills. Not to put your staff in a place, but to empower them to step out of their comfort zone. You, as your position as a leader, you may be able to see in them things that they don't see in themselves, right? So just as the same way as somebody coming in day one into your company with a fresh perspective, they will see things that you haven't seen before. And it's not to say that their ideas are always right, because there might be context. But like, for example, like when I first started working, when I first took over my own store, um, the organization, the layout of the pharmacy was just like, I couldn't work in it. Others could, because they worked in it for years and years and years. But I'm looking at this workflow, just kind of like where things are set up, and I'm like, it's not efficient. It's like too many footsteps. It's like, for the purpose of what we were doing, which is dispensing prescriptions, this would be more efficient in this way or that way. And I'm sure there was context, right? Like, coming up from like the store that I took over was about 15 years old, 10 years old by the time I took it over. And it was like building up volume. So there wasn't a lot of staff, there wasn't a lot of volume. Probably like the pharmacist was doing all of the work themselves. So the positioning of things probably made sense for that time. But by the time I took it over, the prescription volume was enough to have multiple people working at one time. And the layout no longer worked, and it hadn't changed. I didn't take over the store and have the layout, the volume suddenly spike up. It was already there, and then it's like, well, we could be more efficient of this. So I was that person. I was that person coming in and being like, do we like what we're kind of doing here? So that's that perspective of like understanding the the gifts, the unique perspectives of other people. And from a leadership perspective, like, what does that mean? If you are able to provide vision or direction as a leader, to be able to not just like come up with a direction in your own brain, but talk to people, talk to your staff, talk to your employees, talk to patients and customers and all the different stakeholders, and understand like what do you all want? Like, we're all in this together, right? Like, we're all trying to do our best here for various reasons. Understanding also what drives people becomes important as well, because if you know what drives people, then you can help make their roles make sense, or find things for them to do that are more aligned. Like, if somebody is really passionate about operations, if they're really passionate about efficiencies, then that might be the person to put on that, rather than put them out in the front line and talk to people if that's not what they're interested in. So understanding how to use your perspective and your experience as a leader, and then also understanding how to listen. So listening is this thing that I think comes up a lot. I think what I see, especially with like leadership coaching and um, like executive coaching and stuff like that, those things are all focused on giving the one individual the skills to be like, I'm a better leader now. I'm more comfortable in my role, blah, 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 all of those things. And that's important. You need to be comfortable. You need to be confident, because you need to know like clearly what you're doing as a leader, not the specific things, but like how you're going to do it and how you're going to show up in difficult situations when you have to make difficult decisions. Um, so, oh, my rant meter is fizzling out. So it's important to find that, have that direction and listen to people, like listening, right? Like, this is not just like a skill that you do just when, like, it's not a performative skill for when an employee comes to you and then you're like, I'm going to demonstrate that I'm listening to you now. Like, that's terrible listening. That's really bad. Because then you're just being performative. Like why all the performance? So performance is one of those things that I would love to like take out of the equation. the performance is such a big part of what I view as corporate culture of like, hey, look, like I'm dressed up in a suit and all of this stuff, right? Um, so then, like being able to give people that vision that's not just from your own head, but to be able to listen to them, to distill their ideas, to accept them, right? And to accept the things that are not so good, the things that aren't working well, to be open to like criticisms and all of that, and to be able to take them and actually do something. Because if those things exist, there's a reason. There's a reason for it. So think about that. The other piece of it is support. Like, where does support come in? Support for your employees to do the jobs and do the things that need to be done to meet like a certain goal. So ideally, if you are listening to people, you're moving towards something that everybody agrees on is a good thing to move towards, right? Otherwise, like, why would you work at a company? And of course, there's an answer to that. Like, I need money, it's just a job, blah, 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 all of those things. Cool. But then if you're working in somewhere that you're like, okay, I'm on board with this, then how you get there is a function of the support that you have. So do you have people around you that are supporting you with the materials that you need, the technology that you need, the process that needs to be in place? Is there a feedback system of like, hey, like this kind of this thing works better this way, and then like, why not take the learnings of somebody who's actually doing it every single day and then spreading it out to everyone else? It's like, hey, like we've got an improvement over the way that we're doing things. So providing the support, not just in terms of like tools and like job aids and stuff like that to get a job done, but also like the intangible support, like just making sure that everybody feels safe and valued. We talk about safe spaces a lot. There's been a lot of talk about like diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in corporate spaces, and all of that is just like talk, because like people go back and forth on everything, which we've kind of seen in the last year or so. But ultimately, it's like we are humans operating with other humans. So then uh, we are humans operating with other humans to serve other humans. Like, we are all people in this thing. People. We're all people in this. So it's like just the base level of like thinking about like how you like taking it back to that humanistic level, that person level, becomes so important. And I think that's something that really gets missed a lot of the times. So where does this leave us right now, right? Like with the Haizhen transformation, the idea here is for you to get in touch with who you truly are. Because if you don't know who you are at the core, and you're not operating at yourself, you're living in at that level of performance, you're just simply doing the things that people told you should do, you're not operating as yourself, and it's challenging. It sucks. I'm telling you, it sucks from experience. And you may disagree with me. You may be happy with your life as it is now, and that's fine. Live your life. But what I have observed is there was a point in my life when I did not know how to show up as myself in in many different spaces, right? I didn't know how to show up as myself. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know how to do that all the time. I mean, sorry, I know how to do it. Whether or not I do it is still my choice, because I still give myself the space to feel uncomfortable, to understand where the challenges are in that process of showing up as myself. And ultimately, I think that is the reason that we exist here. We're living here to have a human experience, and part of that human experience is to go through all of these things, right? Like to have the like the racing thoughts, the self doubt, like and all of that to move us forward into something new. So, starting at the position of understanding who you are is the first step. If you can't show up as yourself, then you're going to be always performing for somebody. And then because you're performing, you're going to want to know if you're performing correctly. So then you're looking for validation, not validation for yourself, who you are at the core, but for validation of the performance that you're putting on. And how wild is that? Like if you were working and be like, I'm doing this performance, is this how like am Am I acting the way that I think you want me to be perceived? And then tell me how great that is. And there's a lot of structure to, like, there's a lot of structure that's laid out to make things that way for people, right? So stop the performance and start living as yourself. What does that mean? That's where Haizhen Transformation comes in. That's where the clarity that you'll get from understanding your human design chart, from understanding who you are meant to be, your special gifts, your uniqueness, and to put a layer of clarity over your experience. That's where the first phase of Haizhen Transformation comes in. The second spot is that transformation piece of like feeling more and experiencing more and more into that. It's a process. It's not like you could wake up tomorrow and be a completely different person, act completely differently, make completely new decisions. That's completely up to you. Ultimately, what you'll find though is like that's just one layer. It's a matter of like peeling back the layers. You can think of it like peeling back the layers of an onion. In spiritual conversations, you'll be thinking about the lotus, where there's the leaves that kind of like peel away and reveal the core in the middle. Like that is the experience. You're not getting rid of anything that's not yours, right? What's happened instead is over your life, however many years that you've lived, I'm gonna guess about 30 to 40 years is probably in that in the range of like who would be watching this video. If you're under that age, it's also absolutely fine because these are things that you want to start thinking about at some point if you have the capacity to. But really what happens is life will be a series of continually shedding layers that are no longer yours or that are not yours to hold on to. When you start to shed those layers, then you can begin to reveal more and more the core of who you are. You can step out and present yourself and engage with people with less barriers, kind of removing all the walls. Let's take the layers away so that I can be me in front of you. And if I can be me in front of you, that's when I get to really shine because then I'm leaning into my strengths. I'm not trying to be somebody who I'm not, right? Like I just can vibe. I can vibe because I know what's important to me. I know who I am. I know what I want, and I can make decisions that support me in aligning to that and making choices that align me to that. I talked about decisions versus choices, I think 2 days ago. So if you're curious about what the difference between decisions or choices are, go back and watch that video. If I was prepared, I would probably link it somewhere here or somewhere there. But I don't think I'm going to do that. So it'll be all on this playlist. Go and check that out. But ultimately, the last step is brilliance, to understand where you shine. Show up. How you show up. What that piece looks like, I've not fully come to yet. I think that there's support there in terms of like the usual ways that we signal to other people, especially in our current context of work, for example. So resumes, cover letters, and interviews. If you're not comfortable showing up as yourself in an interview, then who are you trying to be in that interview? And then stop it. Figure out who you are. Figure out who you are because that's important. It will be very difficult to enter into an interview and then not know who you are and also not know what you want. That's part of that self-leadership that the Haizhen Transformation builds into the program, builds into your journey from where you are now to where you want to be. So there's kind of that. I think ultimately though is the brilliance piece will be about how you represent yourself out into the external world. So the first phase of the program is to have clarity on who you are so that you can see clearly. The second is to transform, which is to change your personal experience. Your lived experience of yourself will change. That's going to happen when you follow along with the Haizhen Transformation. And then finally, the brilliance piece is to put yourself down on paper, to externalize your internal reality so that I think it's for two reasons. One, to feel is one thing, to see it outside of you, either written down on paper, put into put down on paper, or put in front of other people that can validate that and reflect that, like, oh yeah, this really is you. Back to you is another feedback loop. So then now you have your internal observations, experience, and reality pointing and signaling to exactly what your human design chart is pointing to. And then you're representing this externally in various different places as well. And it might be even something that you just start with, like reading to yourself. And when you can read that to yourself and you see it and you're like, yes, like this matches. All I can say is that it's something that you'll feel. You will feel right, rather than trying to play a role, trying to perform into something. That is one of those. And then to show up into spaces, it's like, how do you show up in an interview feeling like you are the right one for the job? Like, why are you the only reason that you would get an interview is that you may be qualified for the job based on the job description, right? So if you're in that position already, there's no need to show up into that interview worried about whether or not you're qualified for the job. Like, that's baseline for getting that interview. So like little shifts like that of like, how do you show up in an interview? What kind of information do you put down in a cover letter or a resume that will get it noticed and have it stand out, right? These are all things that the brilliance piece of the program is meant to signal to you, to show you just how great you are. You're going to externalize it, and other people around you are going to validate it because you're amazing. I'm saying that without any qualifiers. I know. At the core of all of us, we have something that's unique and one of a kind. And sometimes what happens is if we build up too much of a narrative for ourselves and live by that false narrative, it becomes very difficult to reverse. I think that we see this in a lot of different like people where we would point to, like, you could probably think of a list of names of like, oh, this person was terrible and that person was terrible and that person was terrible. And objectively, sure, they've done some terrible things probably. And maybe even continue to do. Like, I don't know who I'm talking about. But when you understand that that's a narrative that you're crafting and that you're living into a story that might not absolutely be yours, then you can change that. You can change that and live more authentically aligned with yourself. Ultimately, that is the goal. That is the goal. That is the goal. That's where we're going. And if you're going to come along with me, I welcome you. If you know who this is, bonus points. One of my biases. I'm just going to pop that out there because this is one of my favorite mugs. And speaking of leaders and captains, captains are leaders of ships and pirates and things like that. So if you know who this shirt belongs to, bonus points for you as well. Because, like, what does leadership look like? Is this not leadership? Draw me a picture of leadership, and I'll tell you what I think about it. So that's it for today. This was a little bit of a longer one. It ended up being a little bit ranty. And I think it was just a process of some thoughts that had been rumbling around, settling down. So you've made it this far. I appreciate you. I will see you tomorrow.